called Ben's house first, he never met me in the lobby. I called up Dad, went to voicemail for Mom. He said they always miss me, family, now's a chance. I got a plan, it involves me not leaving home quite as fast, cause that sounds nice to me. The clouds in the sky are like kites to me.
DJ Toasty Z, Hip Hop Made Me Do It. We're live out in Providence with the one, the only Eric Axelman. How's it going, dude?
Hey, not too shabby. Chilling.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you on.
Hey.
I know that, like I said, I had seen you perform 2 years ago, maybe even more, at a house show at UMass, and I was like, I know this guy's from Providence. I know he's super dope artist, and I figure I'd reach out and just start building something out in Providence.
Hell yeah. No, that was a fun show. Yeah, that was a hilarious show. Yeah, we had done something in Toronto and Hamilton, Canada, and then driven back and barely got there at the nick of time, and it was a really, really fun show.
Yeah, for sure. I that was my friends. It's interesting because that was a house that some friends lived in, and then they moved out, but I feel like I always knew the people that lived there.
James Frank was the dude that we knew.
James Frank, yeah, for sure. Shout out James Frank.
Yeah, who's brothers with our friend Tana Frank, we know from college.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and that was actually my homie Enlightened Jordan.
He's awesome.
Yeah, that was one of his. It's interesting because looking back, his performance and how he's evolved in the last 2 years, he's gone really hard, and that was one of the first live performances he did at UMass in the area, and since then he just did a ton of shows senior year, and he moved out to LA. I just saw him when I was last out there.
That's dope. No, he's really talented. He's a really good dude too. I've communicated with him throughout the years.
Yeah,
he's a really nice guy.
It's really awesome to see how certain artists evolve. In a year or two.
Yep.
Where they started out. You always thought they had the talent, but to see the evolution from 1 year to the next, or even a couple months, is crazy to see.
Especially when you're in college and you're changing so much and kind of figuring out what you want to do and stuff like that. So he's the man. I was really impressed with his performance that night. That was the first time I'd seen him perform too, though I'd met him before. But yeah, he's a really, really nice guy.
Yeah, and what have you been doing creatively and musically since then?
Totally. Yeah, so I do a lot of music stuff, partly music for music's sake, and then partly kind of for other purposes and combined with other creative ventures and stuff like that. So I put out an album this past about a year and a half ago, and I've been making a lot of music videos from that. So a lot of what I've been doing is music video work, and so I do a lot of film stuff. So I really, really like making kind of very weird, self-directed and self-produced
I noticed
music videos.
A lot of trippy music videos when I was looking up your stuff.
Yeah, so I really like making music videos, and I haven't been performing as much because I'm really busy and I do a lot of other stuff for my job, which I can talk about. But I perform hip-hop constantly, but mostly for kids.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I do is I co-run this nonprofit I co-founded with my main musical and educational partner, Oliver Sideshow Arias, who goes by Sideshow. And we basically go to schools all up and down the East Coast, and we're expanding nationally this year, which is really good. But this past year and a half, we've been doing stuff kind of from Maine to Philadelphia.
Awesome.
Basically kind of using hip-hop as a way to start kind of difficult conversations about the complexities of race in America, and basically, especially relating to kind of segregation and mass incarceration. So while I don't perform shows that much these days, I perform hip-hop music constantly, usually at 9 a.m. for a couple hundred kids.
That's awesome.
Which is pretty fun. And then I make music videos.
Yeah.
So definitely, not what, a couple years ago when I was younger, I was like, I want to be a hip hop artist and all this stuff. And I'm not going to be a full-time hip hop artist ever for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Which I'm 100% fine with. But yeah, so a lot of what I do is, again, use hip hop as a way to start difficult conversations about the kind of realities of race in America. And we talk with both schools that are almost, primarily or almost predominantly students of color, and then almost entirely white kids. And a lot of it's kind of using my and my partner's very different kind of life stories to talk about how race impacts different communities in our country, and kind of how, the realities of white privilege and, discrimination of people of color.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of, and then for fun, I just make music videos.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's
definitely
super fun.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. I was seeing your TED Talk that you did.
Yeah.
And I was also just curious, what kind of, it might not be intuitive how education and hip hop can work together to some listeners. So how do you incorporate those two, and what kind of things do you teach
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess a couple of different ways. I mean, one is the very basic idea that, kids oftentimes don't want to talk about modern racism. I think white kids, it's often very kind of confusing for them to talk about race, and oftentimes very kind of emotionally difficult because, they're born into this world. It's not their fault they're born into this world, but they're born into a world in which their skin color and the history of people who have their skin color have been treated far better than other people in America, right? And again, while that's not their individual faults, right, it's also important to come to terms with the fact that, randomly a certain part of the population is just given more than other part of the population. And this is kind of intertwined with the fact that most white kids, not all white kids, but most white kids grow up in very segregated places, which are overwhelmingly white. And so a lot of what we try to get kids to understand is how that separation and how that racial segregation is part of this kind of larger racist structure, and especially how that influences how people think about race. And a big way in which we're able to do that is through the consumption of hip-hop. And talking to kids, especially and I'll talk about kids of color afterward, but this is specifically white kids. White kids are obsessed with hip-hop.
For sure.
You and I are white. We're obsessed with hip-hop, right? No matter where you're from in the U.S., right, the main consumers of hip-hop for a long time have been white kids.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of numbers. And in terms of, especially in terms of spending. Right? It's difficult to know exactly what percent of hip hop consumers are white, but it's definitely a very large amount, likely a significant majority. Because white people are also 60% of the population of the US, so it also makes sense, right? So a lot of what we get kids to think about is how we learn about other communities when we grow up in such intensely segregated places. And I grew up in rural Maine, and Maine is the whitest state in the country. Maine's 96.9% white. Despite that fact, hip-hop was by far the most popular form of music, and hip-hop was the soundtrack to my childhood in this very bizarre way. So a lot of what we talk about with kids is how they learn about how they learn about racial narratives and how that interacts with the fact that they're so segregated. And so hip-hop is a major way that they learn about other cultures, for better or worse.
Definitely.
There's very positive aspects of that and very negative aspects of that. So speaking from my own experiences, growing up in an unbelievably white place, in many ways, again, hip-hop was this incredible art form in which I was able to learn about mass incarceration. I was able to learn about really important stories relating to the Black experience in America and learn a lot about the racial realities of what it means to be a person of color in America. But at the same time, because it was so segregated, and this was literally the only way we were interacting with people of color is watching them on our computers at the time, right? And oftentimes because we were listening to primarily kind of gangster rap or mainstream rap that's also very explicitly designed and targeted towards white kids, our views of people of color were often incredibly stereotypical and very racist.
For sure.
And people would say the N-word constantly in high school. They kind of used hip-hop as this kind of mask to pretend to be people of color. I said the N-word in high school a lot, and this is something that I talk about when I talk with kids and stuff like that. And I did racist things, of course, as every white person in America has done in their lives. So a lot of what we're talking with kids about is how this very bizarre situation in which white kids never, for the most part, interact with communities of color, but consume the cultures of people of color constantly, and why that exists and what the repercussions and implications of that very, very bizarre relationship are. So we use hip-hop and the consumption of hip-hop to get to those larger discussions of how segregation impacts how we think about other cultures. And what it means that we are not actually interacting with people of color, for the most part, but consuming their cultures constantly. And at the same time, often being straight up racist. And again, I know many white kids who love hip-hop and listen to Black music constantly, but are straight up racist. And this very, very weird phenomenon that occurs in which kids love hip-hop, and they think they understand hip-hop, and they think they represent the culture.
But it's very surface level.
And they're straight up racist. Like, sometimes subtly racist, but oftentimes just really racist too. And so that's a major way that we use hip-hop to talk about those things.
That's very interesting because I think that parallels a lot with my experience of like growing up. I grew up in a very upper middle class northern New Jersey, actually one of the richest areas in the country, very white. And my experience with hip-hop was always, it was something that I wasn't exposed to, and it was something new and exciting. And it also, looking back, it gave me a perspective on how other people live, and kind of got me out of that bubble.
For sure.
And
that's beautiful.
I never understood how like someone could like the people that were super into hip hop but were also had those like super racist or even subtly racist. And I think a lot of times it would be like certain kids would only listen to certain types of hip hop, you know, like gangster rap, and they would kind of use that to reinforce their, you know, racial stereotypes. And for me, I was, you know, it was interesting because hip hop was the way that I became more, you know, I opened myself up into different perspectives.
And that's great. Again, hip hop definitely can't do that. And I've worked with, you know, with many white kids who, again, you know, they also can't choose where they're born into, and they can't choose they're born into segregated places. And they have, again, realized kind of how beautiful hip hop is and used it to get out of their bubble and use it to actually create relationships with people who aren't like them. And that's great. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing hip hop can do. And I think it's done that for me too. You know, it made me realize it taught me a lot about segregation and how I should get out of my bubble. Yeah. But oftentimes, again, it simply reinforces that bubble, right? And actually, unfortunately, and kind of ironically, gets kids to kind of stay close to their bubble and just listen to hip hop. I mean, I've worked with kids who, again, you know, who listen to hip hop, you know, every single day of their lives. Then when we ask them to go to actual hip hop events with actual people of color actually doing hip hop, they say absolutely not. Yeah. And they're terrified of being around people of color, but they listen to people of color on their phones for hours a day. And it's
kind of like this bizarre fetishization.
It is a fetish. Yeah, that's actually a very good way of saying it, right? Yeah, it's really weird. But, and again, so, you know, some kids, white kids that I've worked with have, you know, been able to use it in a really wonderful and constructive way. And, you know, I give credit to them and you, of course, you know, but, you know, many people, again, it's this very, very kind of pretty fucked up relationship they have with Black culture.
For sure. And I'm curious, like, how do you get kids, or how do you recommend people break out of those bubbles in general?
Yeah, I think first kind of recognizing that you're in the bubble, right? Kind of and recognizing that that's not really a normal thing. Yeah. And because I think, you know, if you grow up in a pretty white place, that's normal to you, right? And if you listen, if hip hop's on the radio from the time when you're 5 years old, right, and you're listening to this music all the time, right, that's normal to you. And so this you know, this situation of segregation, but listening to Black music, right, and it's also, you know, we see it when we, you know, when we watch basketball, right, many things, right, people of color are oftentimes kind of, you know, they're a very big part of our popular culture. But for many white people, there's very little face-to-face interaction. Yeah. So that relationship is a huge part of American society, right, where we idolize Black celebrities, but don't actually interact with people of color face-to-face. Yeah. For many white people, that's the experience. So I think just recognizing the first step, recognizing just how weird that is. And about how although that's a normal part of American society at this point, it's really weird. And I think getting kids to just realize how strange that is. For sure. Is the first step, I think. Definitely. And how it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. Is the first step. And I think also, you know, recognizing, you know, your internalized racism and kind of recognizing the fact that, you know, like every white person in America has had many racist thoughts. Yeah. Of course. You have, I have. I'd be very surprised if you haven't. Yeah, right? If everyone's being honest with themselves, of course. Yeah. Right? And we grew up in a very racist society. So of course that's going to occur. So I think also just recognizing how we've bought into stereotypes and recognizing our own internalized racism, I think, is a big first step too. Yeah. And not feeling bad about it. Again, it's like not really, you know, obviously I have felt bad about it, of course. I felt ashamed for things I've done. But I think just being honest about it and being like, oh, shit, like, this is what it is. And, you know, it's not okay. And what am I going to do about it?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times people that try and, like, hide from the shame or don't address that, they, you know, it's easier to not address the problem rather than just like there's this like white shame and like not actually doing anything about it, just you know, feeling bad about it and almost kind of running from your privilege rather than using it to help empower others and you know, spread a positive message.
Yeah. And again, it's real. And again, you know, and it's still important to recognize that even if you use your privilege for a good way, and I'm very privileged. Yeah. My parents are doctors. Like I grew up, you know, like knowing that I had resources. Yeah. You know, for sure, I have had resources. Like my parents paid for my college, which is crazy. Like I definitely have those resources, and I definitely am very privileged because of it. I've worked very hard, of course. But of course, mad privileged. So obviously, I try to use my privilege and I try to use the resource I have in a good way. But it's still, and that's good. But it's still also recognize the fact that there's no reason why I have it more than other people do. Yeah. And that like I can still use it in a good way, but it's also still not fair that I have that.
Definitely.
And like, there's, you know, I was just born randomly. Yeah. You know, there's no reason, no logical reason why my parents have more than other people's. Yeah. You know, it's totally illogical.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
just based off the color of my parents' skin and the fact that they've had lucky breaks. And they worked hard too, but
Yeah.
their lucky breaks and their privilege dramatically, made that more possible.
Yeah. And I also think it's important not to take it for granted. It's easy to like, because of my privilege, I work hard, really, really, really hard too, because it's like, I have all these advantages and I should, not run from that and actually use it to,
Yeah, and again, I think just being honest about one's privilege is really, and then again, trying to use it. So being honest about it, being honest with the fact that it's not fair. All right, what am I going to do with this? Right?
Yeah.
But still recognizing that it's not fair. It's not just enough to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing a great job, my privilege. I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
And and it's obviously it's a super weird thing. I think it's a super super weird thing, but it's what it is at this point in American society. But yeah, I mean, and I think most kids, I think it's very difficult for them to recognize their privilege because again, it's a very weird thing to realize that you have that, your life is only the way it is because of randomness. Right?
Yeah.
Even though I think I'm a smart dude and I work hard, I mean, like, just so many advantages I've had for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
And there's no reason, it's I was lucky to be born a certain way, and that's crazy.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. And I think in the TED Talk that I watched, you guys had mentioned just like along that vein, like you brought up the example of Iggy Azalea and like how you be a part of hip hop culture and like recognize what you're taking from it and what you're adding to it.
Totally.
And I think a lot of times it just comes down to authenticity.
Yeah.
It's like if you have an Australian woman that's coming into hip hop and using the accent of a black Southern woman when she raps, but then, you hear her speak and she has an Australian accent. It's like, as long as you need to just be yourself in this world and not try and like co-opt another person's not only style, but, accent and culture,
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, and again, like, obviously I think a lot of white people, when they get into hip hop, and I definitely, when I was kind of starting to perform hip hop, I wasn't sure what people would think of me. But, there's mad white people who do hip hop.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And people get mad respect. And obviously people of color they can talk about this more than I can.
Yeah.
But if they're just being pretty honest about their history and who they are, and also about what it means to be white. It's like, if you're just real about what it means to be white in America, you're not hiding from it. You're not pretending that you come from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think people like Post Malone are so annoying. And Post Malone makes amazing music. And I love Post Malone's music. I listen to his music a lot. And it's really, really good. And he's way better than Iggy Azalea. He's very talented.
Yeah.
Right? But he lies about his story.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes other people's stories. And then isn't honest about it.
Yeah.
And isn't honest about the difference, about what it means to be white in America.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's not. Like, hip-hop culture, although it's multicultural, of course. Yeah. And is a global culture, right? Is rooted in the Black and Latino experience. Mm-hmm. And the classic hip-hop stories and kind of what we think of as the main narrative in hip-hop are Black and Latino, of course. Yeah. Right? And Post Malone, right, basically copies those stories word for word, right? He basically pretends that he's, right, he grew up. Like, if you were just to listen to his songs and not know who was saying them, right, you would think that he was basically trying to be, right, someone from an impoverished area, right, who's coming up, right? And he's not honest about that at all. He's not honest about the fact that he's, right, he grew up in Rochester, in like the suburbs of Texas, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, maybe, I don't know, I haven't looked up his story, but like, right, in the song Rockstar, when me and my friends come up, we make the thing go rat-ta-ta-ta. Yeah. He has never experienced violence in any significant way. In any way. Yeah. Right? And he takes, like, if you look, like, there's an interview with Charlamagne the God where he's like, yo, man, yo, man, like, the things that I do, like, I don't do them because they're black. I do them because I like them. It's like, well, you like them, but they're all black. Like, your braids, everything you do, like, he takes from black culture. And he's not real about it. And then when it comes to Black Lives Matter, or when it comes to actually standing up for the rights of people of color, he's totally silent. Yeah. My thing especially is like, yo, if you're benefiting from this culture, which he is, and I am, he obviously is financially much more than I am. Yeah. Right? His entire career is based off of black stories and black culture, undeniably. Right? 100%. Right? Yeah. And then when he's asked about what you're doing for Black Lives Matter, and are you actually doing something to stand up for people who created this culture, he's like, I don't know, like I'm young, I'm a kid, I don't need. It's like Chance the Rapper, like you're as old as Chance the Rapper, and Chance the Rapper's doing amazing things. Like,
Yeah,
it's not an excuse. And I think for many white people, it's like, when people ask you that, it's like they're not asking you to be like an amazing person, but it's just like be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and be like, yeah, you're
if
right.
If you're gonna be in it, you have to be all the way in. Like not like there's this like, oh like, yeah, like you're just like taking what you want from it, but not like, you're halfway in.
And it's not even like it's like, and like my friend Sideshow says that he's like, we're not asking people to like be activists.
Yeah.
Or like devote their life to, but it's just like be honest.
Yeah.
It's like just be real. And
if he was to be like, yeah, these are, things that I like in culture. I think a lot of people don't even understand that like Black culture is just. I mean, Vince Staples said something where he's like, why are we calling it Black culture? Like Black culture is culture. Like
in America,
it's so dominant that it's like to the point where some white people don't even understand that they're taking things from Black culture or taking things from hip hop. Like, people now, wearing Timbs as a fashion statement, like that was hip hop in the 90s.
Totally.
Like there's all these things that like white people that are from the suburbs don't even realize that they're influenced by hip hop.
Totally. No, and I think, in the Charlamagne the God interview with Post Malone, I think he definitely, I think that is very, that describes the situation very well. Post Malone is like, this is just, it's culture like this. I'm just like these things. But yeah, it's all Black. And like, of course, like the things I wear, of course, are influenced.
Yeah.
Everything. Like everything I do. And I can still be original within that. And I can still tell my own story.
Yeah.
But of course, it's all based on Black culture. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Of course. And that's like where it's like, like if you're benefiting that much from Black culture, like, just say something about Black lives. It's like do something. Like, not asking for that much.
It's very weird because like there are certain artists, and it's not always black and white. Not because like there's certain artists where I'm like, this makes me uncomfortable, but then I'm like, well, is this really authentically them? Or is it, like for instance, example like Bad Baby, like Catch Me Outside Girl, like my first instinct is like this is someone that's co-opting and like super racist, but then I'm like, well, maybe she's just like legitimately like white, like not as an insult, but like a white trash person that's like grown up and like this is how she lived her whole life, and it's like if this is authentically her, like then it's like it's not always. There's certain artists that I feel that way about, and other artists I'm like, I don't feel the same way about. So it's weird to see where you draw the line yourself.
Of course. And again, of course, people come from very different places, and white people are affected by poverty in America, of course. White people have hard lives too in many cases. But, it's like if you're doing hip hop, no matter what your story is, you're still borrowed from Black culture.
Definitely.
Eminem, right? His story is honest, but he's still taking from Black culture, and he would recognize that, of course.
Yeah, White America, that song is
it's a great song.
Yeah, he's very self-reflective and like,
And like you can be a poor white person and have a hard time, right? But your life is still going to be easier in many ways than the average Black life in America, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be treated as badly by people in authority, and right, you have opportunities, right, that other people aren't going to have, right? And you're still taking from a culture that isn't yours. So again, I mean, I think white people, like I'm from rural Maine. I'm from a very, even though I have like I'm from a really poor part of rural Maine, and like I recognize that like white people can be, there are many poor white people in America, and white people have been screwed over. Many poor white people have been screwed over in America too. Yeah, and like that's real, and like of course, but they've been screwed over less than people of color,
for sure,
in basically every instance. So it's like like in Maine, and Sideshow and I have done work in like the Maine youth prison. Maine is like 3 to 4% people of color, right? It's the whitest state in the country. Right, so when you go to like the Maine youth prison, right, of course the majority of kids there are gonna be white. So again, like white kids and white people are affected by mass incarceration too, right? But you go into that place, and although the majority is white, it's not 96% white. Yeah, it's like 70% white, or like 65% white. So right, so people of color are, even though they make up a tiny, it's portion like overly of Maine,
represented in prisons. Yeah.
I mean, of course, but also even in a place like Maine, it's like
even in Maine,
right? Even in the whitest state in the country.
Well, we even think like certain areas that we tout as being so progressive. If you look at statistics, it's like it's still like, it might be better than certain areas, but like only on the surface. Yeah. Like Massachusetts, like, you know, like
Massachusetts, actually, it's interesting. I mean, Massachusetts is crazy segregated and like, you know, from what my friends of color say, like super racist. Like Boston, I live in Boston, but like, you know, my friends of color say that like they feel race more in Boston.
Oh, for sure.
But again, you know, in terms of like arrest rates from the stuff I've seen, like racial disparity in arrest rates in Massachusetts is one. It's some of the least. This is smallest disparity of any state in the country, which is good. There's still a disparity. You know, every single state, people of color are arrested significantly more than white people in every single state. Massachusetts is one of the lowest disparities. But you know, other progressive states, it's not, you know, like Wisconsin and like, you know, like many Midwestern states, the disparity is crazy high.
Yeah.
In Maine, it's crazy high. Rhode Island, it's crazy high. You know, so it's everywhere. And yeah, and again, like, you know, every northern city is unbelievably segregated. Every single one. Yeah. Without exception. So, you know, white progressives love to be progressive, but don't like to live around people who aren't white for the most part.
Yeah. Again, it's like there's this like fake wokeness. And there's almost like, I was joking about how like some of the most woke people are the most racist because they're like trying, like, they don't treat people like people. And you know, it's important to recognize privilege and race, but also to be like, sometimes people are so entrenched in that they're not like actively just like treating people with kindness, and you know, it's like they're othering people, but you know, rather than just coming together and helping others, you know.
Yeah, no, one thing that was interesting is like my grad, so I'm a very part-time grad student. I almost finished like a grad program, and my my advisor was like amazing, and she's like the poet laureate of Boston. And is a Haitian American woman, and it's like just brilliant. And one thing, you know, I did an independent study with her at one point, and I was talking about the idea of like white allyship or whatever. She's like, yo, like I get what people mean by that, and I understand that, you know, but also like, instead of using the word ally, I'd rather just use the word like friend. Like, just view me as a human being that has been fucked over and that like is treated unfairly and is othered in the society. But these categories are also, although they affect us in totally real ways and therefore are real because we've made them real, they're also all made up ultimately. And like, we are all just people, and just viewing me, you know, as a separate category. Although, like, again, in America, these categories exist and they're real, and it's important. And saying that they don't exist is ridiculous.
They're real in consequence, and it's important to keep those two ideas of they don't really exist and we're all human. They do exist societally, and we need to fix those changes. It's important to keep those like seemingly conflicting ideas together, you know.
And she you know, she was like, yo, like, my best friend is white, right? And like, and she's like, and I love him, like, not as a white person, but as a person. Like, I love him, and like, again, society treats us in different ways, and that sucks, and like, that's real, and we have to recognize that. But also, like, we're both people, and like, he's not my ally; he's like my best friend. And that was like a pretty, you know, that, you know, I liked how she said that too, you know, because again, like, create the thing like, I am a white ally and I am this right here. But it's like, yeah, I get that, and it's like a good first step. You know? But it's like, yeah, like, I'm a person, and like, I'm treated better than other people, and that's really fucked up.
For sure.
And like, I shouldn't be.
I was also curious about, like, you said you were working on a film.
Yep.
What's that about?
Yeah. So as part of the nonprofit, and we're actually splitting it off from the nonprofit. The nonprofit that I co-run is called Pushed Learning in Media, and that's where we do the anti-racist stuff. And my main partner in that is Sideshow, and there's a bunch of other really great teaching artists that are part of that too. And this film that we're working on, we had previously called it 70 Years Across the Sea, but we're in about a month, we're going to be releasing our newest trailer and rebranding it to Israelism.
Okay.
And so it's about the American-Jewish relationship to Israel-Palestine and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So, you know, related definitely because it's ultimately about, you know, race and about the history of oppression, but in a very different way. So we're splitting it up because it's, at first, they were all small projects, and so we're like kind of lumping them together into one thing. But ultimately, they're kind of different enough that it makes sense to kind of have them in two different organizations. But yeah, so it's about kind of the kind of tragic history of the Jewish people, and I'm Jewish. Yeah. Are you Jewish?
So it's interesting. Like, my mom's Jewish, so according to Judaism, I'm Jewish. It's interesting because my grandma, they're German Jews. They just barely escaped the Holocaust. Yeah. But I'm so detached from it that it's like not something I identify with, you know? So, but it's weird to like have that history and not feel it's like a part of you, you know?
No, yeah, it's crazy. And so, yeah, so it's about the kind of, you know, obviously the really tragic history of the Jewish people, and trying to be honest about the tragic history of the Jewish people, and then really looking at, what basically different paths Jews took in the 20th century. Some paths that they chose openly, other paths that kind of they didn't really have a choice in. But which led to the development of kind of two main Jewish communities, right? So before World War II, before 1900, most Jews in the world lived in Eastern Europe or the Middle East.
Yeah.
And then after World War II, basically all Jews lived in either the U.S. or Israel, right? Israel, Palestine. And what those two choices represented to different Jews, and also, how they were able to make those choices and get those from places. And then also kind of, the impacts of those communities to each other, and then also how they impacted other people too. So a lot of it is, it's about kind of the very strange ways in which the American Jewish community became tightly allied with Israel, and kind of tightly wound up in the idea that Israel was a major part of our identity as American Jews. And then that juxtaposed with the very brutal and really oppressive history of the state of Israel.
Yeah.
And obviously again, some Jews who went to Israel had no choice. Right? And for about 20, I think it's important to note that from about 1920 to about 1948.
Yeah.
The great majority of Jews had come to the U.S. The U.S. was open; they were accepting refugees from Eastern and Southern Europe. Most Jews went there. From about 1920 to 1948, America accepted almost no refugees. Right? America created a bunch of racist immigration laws, and many times, right when Jews needed protection the most, they didn't have protection, and many went to Palestine. However, despite that fact, other people lived in Palestine.
Yeah.
Right? And they lived there for a very long time. And even though we as Jews, again, obviously come from that place, right, and our religion is based in that place, in terms of talking about a actual, real, and lived connection with that place, right, comparing our connection with that place with the Palestinian connection with that place is laughable.
Yeah.
Right? Having a connection with a book that was written 2,000 years ago, right, telling you that this is your homeland, right, when you've never actually been there, compared to someone who actually lives there.
Yeah, for sure.
And whose family has actually lived there for hundreds of years, right? Those connections are not comparable in my mind. And so one quote that this professor once told me is like, the Jews were both refugees and colonists, and they were both, and you can be both, right? But they were colonists too. And even though and so a lot of it's talking about the reality of that situation, and kind of the terrible things that have occurred in Israeli history. And while I'm a little more sympathetic to the early colonization of Palestine, because again, in some cases they had few options, they also chose to dominate as opposed to just live there as equal citizens. And then the part that is, unjustifiable in my mind is the occupation of the West Bank. And there is no legitimate, absolutely no justification for that. And it's just wrong. And it's just incredibly cruel.
Yeah.
And so, we have this very complex Israeli history, some of which is sympathetic and some of which is understandable. Much of it, in my opinion, is not.
Yeah.
And then you have an American Jewish community, which for a variety of reasons has supported that history, for the most part, unconditionally.
Yeah.
For the past 70 years. For some understandable reasons, some tragic reasons, and some pretty messed up reasons. And that has, contributed to the suffering of millions and millions of Palestinian people, right, who basically did not have a choice in this matter, right? And again, I'm always sympathetic to the plight of refugees, and again, Jews were refugees. But they were not refugees because of a conflict with Arab nations. They're refugees because of a conflict with Europeans. Right?
Yeah.
Europeans created the Jewish refugee issue, right? Europeans created anti-Semitism as we know it.
Yeah.
Europeans created the Holocaust. And then who suffered from all that? Palestinians.
Yeah. It's like an overcorrection of like the wronging that they've been doing, that was done upon them. And it's like, then it's like ignoring
the cause of that.
Yeah.
And also, again, like, the ones who actually created the suffering didn't ultimately suffer at all. Didn't ultimately take any responsibility. All of Europe was like, oh shit, the Holocaust. Yeah, you guys should get your own country. But in the Middle East.
Yeah, not over here.
But not over here, right? And the Germans gave German Jews, reparations, stuff like that. But again, so But again, a major part of it is looking at kind of the very interesting ways in which, the American Jewish community has become aligned with the Israeli Jewish community. And then again, how that level of unconditional support between them came into being. And then, especially in the last 20 to 30 years, how that level of unconditional support is fracturing in a very significant way. And young American Jews are, rejecting an identity based upon a foreign country. Which, although they say are some cultural and religious, relationships and a shared history in many ways, right? We do not have to, right, support for any reason, right? And if they, deserve our support, we should support them. But if they don't deserve our support, right, we should not give it to them. Yeah. And also, figuring out the really messed up ways in which we've supported a lot of the most brutal aspects of American history, especially the, brutal and highly illegal occupation and settlement of the West Bank. Which is a crime. So a lot of it, is so we've done we're working on it for about almost 2 years now.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that. Yeah.
Yep, we've done 2 filming trips to Israel and the West Bank, and we've been able to interview some really cool people. We've interviewed Noam Chomsky and Cornel West.
I did see that. Yeah,
and they're and a bunch of people in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and we have a rough cut of the film, which is great, and the film will be finished by early fall. And then we'll be shopping to distributors. And the newest trailer will be coming out in early June. And the film is called Israelism. So that's been a really great experience. And I, in my life, I want to do the things that I want to do. And my ideal life is kind of doing half, anti-racist stuff and then half film stuff. It's just super fun.
For sure. Definitely. That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, it's been hard. And we make very little money. You got to just, do it. But we're trying to, own it entirely ourselves, and it's totally independently produced. And, although we're not making a lot of money now, we're investing in ourselves and trying to create something that's entirely our own.
Yeah, the independent route isn't always the easiest, but it's the most rewarding. Yeah. Because especially if you can, make it work, it's like,
And, ultimately it's like, even if you don't make a lot of money off it, it's like life is short. And why not do what you want to do if you can do it? And if you can, not starve doing it. It's like, why not? It's
like life is short, but it's also important to realize, like, hey, if this doesn't work out, like, life is also long. Like, I can always go that. Oh, yeah. It's like, it's better to try to do it yourself at first, and then if it doesn't work out, it's like you have options going forward. It's not, life's not over.
Totally. Oh yeah, totally.
So just to finish up, I'd love to just talk briefly about the Providence scene. Like, I just moved here, and I'd love to, generally get your take on the scene to start off.
Totally. No, it's really dope. And again, so I live in Boston now, but I'm in Providence, 2 or 3 days a week. And I moved there for a variety of reasons. I'm in a grad program in Boston, and my brother lives in Boston, so I live with my brother. Yeah. Which is really fun. And because I moved there because I could still do stuff in Providence all the time. But yeah, it's a really cool. I mean, Providence is a really cool city. It's really dope. It's predominantly people of color, which is really interesting, and there aren't that many cities in which that's the case, but there's also a still sizable white population. So it's, obviously it's very segregated. Yeah. But it's also, there's really cool opportunities, and, it has a really cool future. The music scene is really dope. I mean, it's like, it's not huge. Yeah. But like the nightlife in Providence and like the art scene is just really cool. There's a lot of cool people doing really cool things, not necessarily trying to be famous, but just like trying to do cool art and just have a good time. And people do make it, but also it's really hard to be a entertainment artist forever. Yeah. People use arts in a lot of really, really cool ways in Providence, which is really, really dope. But yeah, you should definitely interview my best friend Sideshow. And he's part of this band, which I co-founded, but no longer am active in because I just don't have time. But they're doing awesome stuff called the Funk Underground.
Yeah, that was when you performed. You were with them. Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, I love them. They're my family. And so you should definitely interview them. They're really, really cool. There's a lot of really great hip hop bands and just hip hop artists in general in Providence. One of the coolest bands is called Chachi and the International Players. Okay. They're really, really dope, and they've been, they tour internationally. They do a lot of stuff from like Cape Verde and stuff like that. They're really, really cool. There's a lot of like Messy Ties, really cool artists. Brown, although, and I went to Brown back in the day. Yeah. And they're actually, again, it's been pretty encouraging the past, 5 years. More so than when I was there. There's a lot of connection actually musically between people at Brown doing hip hop stuff and the city. So I mean, my favorite rapper to come out of Brown ever is named Dap the Contract. I've had the pleasure of working with. He's in Columbia Law School right now. Oh wow! But he's the best artist. Not to but he's the best artist that I know. Really, he's amazing. and I was able to do a song with him, which was fun recently. But yeah, he's in Providence a lot. He's truly amazing. Warner Meadows is a student at Brown, and he's a really amazing musician, really incredible. Both of them are pretty astounding musicians, and he's like probably 21 years old or something like that. So he's a lot younger than I am, but he's really, really good. This group, which is part of the underground, called In-House Studios, they do a lot of really, really cool stuff. So the artist that I would recommend kind of getting in touch with. This dude named Spaka Sama.
Okay.
Is a cool dude, and he does a lot of cool stuff too. But yeah, it's really cool, and a lot of people are doing really cool stuff. And rent in Providence is cheap enough that you can do cool stuff.
Yeah. For sure.
Which is the beautiful thing about Providence too.
Definitely. Still affordable.
Oh, dude. Compared to Boston, yeah, it is way more affordable than Boston.
Yeah, I'm paying about the same as I was living in Boston, and I was living in a basement apartment, like a small room. Oh, this is amazing. Dope. Yeah, yeah. It's almost too nice for me, honestly.
Yeah. This is although the camera can't see this, there's a really nice room out there. It's like really nice. It's a dope ass spot.
Definitely. And as far as like resources or the in the scene, is there anything I should look into?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So AS220 is this really amazing like venue and like nonprofit. It's like the coolest nonprofit that I know of. And they do tons of different things. They own a massive amount of property in downtown.
Oh, wow.
And they have all these different types of performance spaces. They have massive amounts of housing for artists. So like they have these like amazing lofts in Providence for artists. They have their own restaurant. They have their own youth arts program. And the amount of infrastructure they have, both for kids and for performers and professional artists, is like pretty unparalleled for any nonprofit I've ever seen. Right. And they only do, again, they don't do a lot of things. But the fact that they do that is unbelievable. So again, literally they have, amazing housing for like affordable housing for artists. They have an amazing restaurant. They have like 2 amazing venues. Like they have you can do work shares as an artist. Like I've done a lot of filming there. They rent equipment and let you use their resources for unbelievably cheap. And if you become a member and like volunteer and do other stuff, basically free. So the amount of resources they have, like if you want to do film stuff there, like I filmed a lot of music videos in like their green screen area, like amazing stuff. So in terms of equipment and access to resources, AS20 is amazing. Brown also, if you get in touch with the right people at Brown, I mean the Brown music scene, although it's ephemeral and changes all the time because it's a college scene,
definitely,
is really dope and like way better than when I was there. There's a lot of really cool people making really good music, which is really, really cool. Venues, there's a lot of good venues. Aurora, which is a really cool venue, closed downtown. It's being turned into like I think like apartments or something, which sucks. But there's a lot of good venues downtown, which is really, really nice. PVD Fest. Have you heard of PVD Fest?
No.
You're in for a treat. In a couple weeks, like all of downtown Providence shuts down for like 3 days.
That sounds awesome.
Massive festival, the entire city, and it's unbelievable. Like it's the coolest thing that I've seen in like a city like Providence. Like it's amazing.
Awesome.
And the city supports it in a big way.
Looking forward to it.
Oh, dude, and it's all free, and like it's just there's music everywhere, and like it's amazing. And like the Funk Underground
sounds like a good vlog.
Oh yeah, dude, it's awesome. And when I was with the Funk Underground, we performed there, and the Funk Underground's performing again this year, and like it's so cool. It's really, we still got some time. It's really cool. So yeah, I mean, those are the things that come to mind.
For sure. And are there, I'm curious because UMass had a lot of like these house shows, underground. Totally. Is there like that kind of scene, like venues and stuff like that? Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot in Providence. This woman named Roz, she organizes a lot of really cool, in the past, organized a lot of cool house stuff. In terms of like kind of underground stuff, the community based around the Columbus Theater. So the Columbus Theater is like a really old, amazing venue. And a lot of people who do stuff in affiliation with them also do a lot of really cool underground stuff, which is really dope. There's always been a huge underground scene in Providence. Yeah. I used to do tons of house shows constantly. At houses that I lived in and houses that I had friends in and stuff like that. So no, it definitely exists, and it also exists both at Brown and in other places. For sure. That's always like my favorite because it's like it's just so much more intimate. Yeah, it's like when I'm putting on shows, I'd rather, just bring out 100, 200 kids, maybe charge $5 and just like have everyone vibing rather than like, if you throw a big show. I've gone to huge shows where like literally people are completely like. They're just boring. They're not having fun. They're just standing around. It's like, but the vibe of like a small basement or whatever with like 100 kids like rocking out is like,
Yeah, it's awesome.
Nothing
Yeah, I started doing
matches
shows
it.
at house shows, like in Providence back in the day. We would charge $3 and then make a good amount of money, and it was the most fun thing ever.
Yeah, for sure. It's better to, I'd rather keep, you charge $5 and get more people out than like, go to venue, like charge $10 tickets, only a couple people show up,
Definitely.
It's just more fun to have a lot of people there.
Yep.
I mean, that's basically all the questions I had. I know you have to
yeah.
boogie, but it was a pleasure to have you on the
really
podcast.
Fun. Really fun. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
And definitely. And again, really cool setup here. Really cool you're doing this.
Yeah.
And again, I'll hook you up with a bunch of people.
That'd be sick. Appreciate it. Sounds good.
Of course, man.
Move around and around so perfectly, like thoughts, just like circuitry. Some complain about the air, but it works for me. It's nice. Kinda smells like turpentine, don't it? A porcupine walked down the road, peeing blood, eating trash. How it goes. It's nice when it snows, cause it snows a lot.